Greetings and welcome to the channel. My name is Dr. Gyesie, transformational coach here at Inner Mileage, where we help folks understand the trauma-informed basis of limiting self-beliefs and how to take inspired action to overcome trauma and live resonant lives right here, right now. Today I want to talk about emptiness isn't empty, how the empath finds power in silence, boredom, and in the spirit cosmology. So I want to talk about this question, this notion that emptiness is actually not a sign of failure, but rather a sign of awakening. And what if emptiness isn't empty at all, but a dimension of divine mastery calling you back to your power? So a lot of empaths have been programmed to avoid stillness, where trauma is decoded, identity is reclaimed, and awakening becomes your leadership path. And today what we're going to do is dismantle the cultural and spiritual misunderstandings around emptiness or stillness, especially from empaths. And we're going to draw from many dimensions to make these points. So I want to go into kind of the basic understandings or misunderstandings of emptiness. Emptiness has often been vilified, particularly in a capitalist or post-capitalist or techno-feudal society. It is equated with uselessness. And this might change once AI takes over and there's more lack of meaning, as the OpenAI CEO Sam Altman said. But in Western psychology, emptiness is often pathologized as anhedonia or even depression. And in trauma discourse, it's labeled as dissociation. But emptiness, when rightly understood, is not a deficit, it's a sacred container. In fact, Rollo May described the void not as dysfunction, but as a space of existential courage. Similarly, Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning described the existential vacuum as the threshold of transformation, not the death of meaning. And Christian mystic Thomas Merton often said, there is in all visible things a hidden wholeness. And that wholeness is felt when the empath stops reaching and begins resting. So you realize that empaths raised in narcissistic systems often interpret silence as punishment or abandonment, so they become addicted to noise, drama, movement, not out of desire, but survival. And then you come to the point where you begin to realize that stillness is not rejection. Stillness is a reset. In fact, stillness is the space where your true self emerges unmirrored, unmanipulated, and unmasked. And specifically in the Buddha Dharma, or even in Buddhism, specifically Theravadan Buddhism, the concept of emptiness is known as sunyata. And sunyata in the language of the Buddha, meaning emptiness, refers to the emptiness of self and phenomena, meaning it's not saying that there is nothing, but that nothing is fixed. Everything is impermanent, everything is interdependent, and empty of a separate existence. So even more specifically, and here I'm still speaking about the Buddhist framework, especially in the Madhyamaka, emptiness is the very nature of reality. The Heart Sutra descends that form is emptiness and emptiness is form. Let me give you another metaphor that supports this. In the Christian cosmology, for example, in the opening chapter of Genesis, it talks about the void. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And it was just emptiness, darkness, and water. There was nothing. Same thing, when you sit down to meditate and close your eyes, what do you see? Darkness before the images of your mind show up. It's the same thing when there's a call to prayer. There's emptiness before. Or when people wake up in the middle of the night to do their prayer, devotions, and things like that. So you realize that form is emptiness and emptiness is form. And in Dzogchen, which is the highest view of Vajrayana, for example, emptiness is not cold void. It is luminous, radiant, and intrinsically awake, which means for the empath, stillness doesn't erase your identity. It reveals your essence beyond identity. You stop performing and you start being. And in neuroscience, deep meditation, what is known as the default mode network. Think about this part of you that is the collection of all the programs that make you this subjective self, right? The default mode network is associated with egoic self-referencing. Now, in deep meditation, this part of you goes silent. This is biological nirodha in the language of the Buddha, or cessation of this continuous program that you think is you. And in that stillness, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that is synchronized with your heart and the gut, opens pathways of higher awareness. Meaning, when an empath sits long enough, the empath stops being the character and starts being the consciousness that dreamed the character into being. This is the whole kit and caboodle, you see? So when we go into Christian mysticism, right? In Christian mysticism, emptiness appears as the dark night of the soul. Specifically, St. John of the Cross writes of a time when all spiritual feelings vanish and God seems absent. But this is not divine abandonment, it's divine refinement. You know, in fact, Meister Eckhart said, God is not found in the soul by adding anything, but by a process of subtraction. It's like feng shui, spiritual feng shui. And in an old, kind of a 14th century Christian mystic text known as the Cloud of the Unknowing, the unknown is where God resides, not in logic, but in the apophatic void. See, in the apophatic void. This is deeply resonant for empaths who've got no contact or experienced narcissistic collapse. You feel like God left you, but in truth, you are in the womb of spiritual rebirth. Some spiritual parallels for this include, Jesus being in the desert for 40 days, Elijah being in the cave where God did not appear in the earthquake of fire, but in the small voice. Emptiness is not God's absence. It is God's incomprehensible nearness. Now, when we come to the physics of stillness, in physics, what appears to be empty space is actually the quantum vacuum field, which is a place that's teeming with virtual particles, zero-point energy, and infinite potential, any number of potentials based on the observer. In other words, nothing is never nothing. Nothing is pregnant with energy. Just like the empath stillness, it only looks like emptiness. It's encoded with revelation. Therefore, stillness is edge of chaos territory. You see, it's where the system is poised for a reconfiguration. You've heard the term, the calm before the storm, because the empath's boredom signals that their internal system is repatterning. And in patterns like the flower of life or the Sri Yantra, everything emerges from a still center, the Bindu. This is the dot of silence, the womb point, the origin of all creation. And empaths, whether you rest in that center or not, you're not disappearing. You are entering the point before time, before narrative, and before trauma and distortion. And if any of this resonates with you, type transform in the comment section and know there's no one like you. But I want to say, you left the empath, you left the system, and now you're bored, and you think you're going backward, but in truth, you've entered the initiation chamber. Boredom is the cocoon, not the coffin. Boredom is sacred. Boredom is the gate. Your nervous system, which once equated business with safety, is now disarmed, is overfunctioning. And in that vacuum, divine energy starts to rewire you. See? So we are living in an age of false stimulation, dopamine loops, algorithmic baits, spiritual consumerism, and even AI-generated noise. And the soul is no longer stimulated, it's suffocating. But the empath who learns to rest in stillness becomes a transmitter of the field, of the divine. You don't need more likes, you need more silence. You need more space, more nothing. And in 2025 and beyond, the new leaders are not the most productive, which is useful, but the most present. Emptiness is not what they told you. It is not absence. It is origin. It is your godhood in quiet form. waiting to be inhabited. If this resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Keep ascending, stay empty, knowing that emptiness is the whole. Peace.